Jason from Friday the 13th, the first one, was, I kept thinking of this guy that I saw in my neighborhood when I was a kid. He was misshapen. He had a big ear that was pushed down here, and it was lower than the other ear. So he needed to be retarded, he needed to be hydrocephalic or a pinhead or something like that, you know. So if you can do that and make it look like there's bone structure beneath all these deformations, then the audience buys it.
A group of summer camp counselors are picked off one by one by a mysterious murderer.
Friday the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday the 13th.
So, after Halloween proved you could turn teenage murder into box office gold, a few filmmakers figured all you needed was a date on the calendar and a cast to kill off. And naturally, Friday the 13th made perfect sense. Sean S. Cunningham, the director and producer, didn't even try and hide the fact that he was completely trying to rip off Halloween. Seeing its success on a tiny budget, a movie made for $300,000 ended up grossing over $40 million, and he wanted a piece of that.
I was playing around with titles, and one of the titles that just came into my head at the time was Friday the 13th. And out of frustration, I said, Friday the 13th. Christ, if I had a picture called Friday the 13th, I could sell that.
And he knew if he had figured that out, then probably a lot of other filmmakers would have figured it out as well. So he was in a rush. By the time the marketing campaign started, declaring that Friday the 13th was the scariest film ever made, they hadn't even got a script.
We took out this ad in Variety that said, Friday the 13th, the most terrifying film ever made, was a great big block letters crashing through a mirror.
And by the time filming would start, they still didn't really have a script. Most of the scenes were bare bones, and this led him to letting a lot of the actors improvise their dialogue.
The cast of Friday the 13th, to me, seemed to be just a bunch of kids that were looking for their first break.
Every actor and actress that was under 21 was trying to get an audition.
Everybody was young and overacting. Terribly overacting, everybody.
Tom Kip.
Lisa, I'm not afraid of ghosts.
And considering pretty much no one in this film, other than obviously Kevin Bacon, went on to really do anything, it probably really helped it to mask some of their bad acting with this naturalistic improvised dialogue, because I actually found a lot of the dialogue pretty good, pretty witty, you know. I was pretty impressed. But the director himself didn't even like horror movies. He hated them, in fact, and he was only doing this to basically make a name for himself and make a lot of money.
In the early 70s, I made a horror film with Wes Craven called Last House on the Left, which had some notoriety and some success initially. But as a byproduct, both Wes and I got reputations as being people that would produce really disgusting stuff.
He was a proper guerrilla-style filmmaker. And making this film, he didn't want to make art. He wasn't trying to explore any big creative vision. He just wanted to make a entertaining, exploitative pile of shit. He knew critics would hate it, and they did. He knew parents would hate it, and they did. But he knew that teenagers and moviegoers would absolutely love it. And they did. The film ended up being a massive success, surprising Cunningham himself and a lot of the cast.
The kids would come out of the theater telling the kids who are coming in the theater, oh, you better look out, or there was so much fun. And it became a really big social event.
And not only that, the film went on to have 11 direct sequels, a crossover with Freddy vs. Jason, and a reboot in 2009. It's probably the most successful slasher film of all time. And as much as Halloween was the first, really I'd say this is the first because, you know, Halloween was an organic new thing with a brilliant master director behind it, John Carpenter, who would go on to make so many great films. Whereas this was the first true copycat, made on a shoestring budget, blasted out as quickly as possible with zero ambition about actual making a good film, but they just wanted to make a fun film and, most importantly, a money-making film. And it borrowed and stole a lot of the ideas and tropes and themes and character types and even plot elements from Halloween, but it condensed them and really created the formula for the slasher movie that would spawn so many movies still today, but especially in the 80s. It was just slasher film after slasher film.
Evidently, America wanted to see Halloween because in 1979, Halloween was absolutely raking in the box office dollars. Figured out what a good horror film would need. First of all, you have to start with a prior evil, something that happened a long time ago that was really bad. Then you have to have a group of adolescents in an environment in which they cannot be helped by adults.
Yeah, so Cunningham really embodies that old adage, work smarter, not harder.
100%.
He just basically saw the success of Halloween and thought, I want in on this, I want the dough. And I feel like now in 2025, we have seen so many similar films, you know, like the same setting, camps, forests, a murderer that you can't see chasing you, people being picked off one by one. And when you're so many years down the line, you're like, it's such a simple idea, but it's so effective. I'm quite flabbergasted, like, it's kind of like those ideas that you see on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank if you're watching from America. Wow, this is a really good idea and this is going to make money. It's so simple. Why didn't I think of this? And props to Cunningham for seeing Halloween and being like, let me make my own spin-off on it.
Yeah, 100%. And he never really went on to do much. I think he kind of went into producing more. Most of the cast never went on to do anything, mostly to do with acting talent.
One of them's Bing Crosby's son, isn't it?
One of the things that Barry Moss brought was Harry Crosby, who, as it turns out, was Bing Crosby's son.
The lead of the film actually decided to step away from starring roles despite getting offered a lot off the success of this film, because she actually got herself a stalker who started following her around, doing weird stalker shit, as stalkers do, and completely freaked her out and basically drove her out of the business.
I had someone who came into my life, a very bizarre situation. It was a person who was obsessed and for some reason obsessed with me. I had a reevaluation of my career at that point. I realized that I just didn't want to be in front of the camera that much, that my life was going to be so affected, and it was really affected for quite a while until the person was apprehended.
So this stalker, obviously she's one of the nice looking girls in it, yeah. And is she one of the girls that gets her tits out, or?
No, because it's the final girl never does that, because one of the big rules of slasher movies is that sex is evil, and if you have sex or get your tits out, you will be killed.
Yeah, kind of like when they take the piss in Scary Movie. Have you not seen Scary Movies before? You shouldn't be going around on your own. Is that kind of like unwritten rule?
I never bought into the notion of sex equals death, that the reason everybody gets punished in horror films is because they're sexually promiscuous.
You know, the sex is a big part of it because it starts off in the past. It's quite a weird, funny opening because they're all sitting in the wooden cabin. As camp counselors do, there's always that element of the camp counselors where there's that kind of like Christian element and they're like strumming their guitars.
Awesome American family values.
Just singing like, the water is wide in Jericho, and like you're thinking, oh, these are wholesome people, but you see that the young teenage lad and the young good-looking teenage girl are like looking at each other lustfully and they want to sneak away from this sing-along to, you know, go into the room to basically fuck, and you're thinking like, oh, this isn't going to end well because you know the tone of the film, and they go away into the room and they're sneaking about in the, it looks like the pantry to me, they're in the pantry closet, they start fucking. What I found clever about Friday the 13th, Declan, is the build-up to something happening, because we've seen so many horror films, essentially slasher films. As you said, when they go away to fuck, you know that it's not just going to be like, let's do the business, and then they go back to rejoin their group. Like,
no one's going to be zipping their flies up and like, that one well.
Oh yeah, that was great, and like they then go back to sing Kumbaya. Like, that ain't gonna happen.
Alan Partridge, that was first class intercourse, my dear.
That was first class. Before a murder takes place, the murderer has his own soundtrack that like dun 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 dun.
Get out of that.
The rip-off from Halloween where, you know, it's the first person from the killer, knifes the boy to death, the girl going back like she has nothing to defend herself with, so she's fucking throwing boxes of cereal at him, and then like all of a sudden you just see the shot of her going, ah, and then it cuts forward to present day. So I thought that was really cool opening. I know it was ripped off, but I like it still.
Pretty lousy deaths though, considering this film has really good deaths from a film nerd special effects point of view. Like, you still might get a kick out of them. I mean, by today's standards, they're fucking tame. But the special effects are brilliant. But you don't really see any here. You know, they're basically off-camera kills. Not much blood, not much guts, other than the lad sort of laying there with the big squib blown up in his stomach. And that's fair enough because, you know, a lot of time your opening scenes are kind of, you know, you don't want to go all in straight away. You want to kind of, you know, fucking tease them a little bit. But there's quite a few off-screen kills in this film. Kind of like a disappointing amount. But the quality of the on-screen kills, the ones that are good, are fucking great. And that's all down to Tom Savini.
My first guest tonight is an actor and a stuntman, but is best known for the truly shocking and unbelievable effects he has created as a makeup artist in such films as Dawn of the Dead, Maniac, and Friday the 13th. Please welcome Tom Savini, ladies and gentlemen.
Anytime somebody's head is blown off or a cut throat or a little creature runs around, that's me.
Now, having a head blown off, it comes under makeup?
Okay, speaking of heads.
Oh my goodness.
Wanna take that?
Oh my God. Oh, jeez. How'd you like to be at dinner and have your dog bring this in sometime?
The fucking master, you know, Dawn of the Dead, all his work with George A. Romero, and even making his own films and directing the Night of the Living Dead remake in the 90s. Just a fucking genius. Working with, I gotta imagine, virtually no budget, but the creativity, like, you can see it, how he was such a genius. Some of the deaths in this film are just brilliant. And it's a shame because the directing is awful. Well, awful's a bit harsh. He gets the tone perfect and he set the scene perfectly. He knew what he wanted to do. So I shouldn't say the directing's awful, but the camera work is awful and the editing is really bad. And it's a shame because that's really bad in and around these incredible special effects, you know, where you really see and like, you feel like you can reach out and touch the flesh. It really does look real.
Oh, jeez.
See, you get expressions here.
He's got kind of a nasty head wound up here.
Yeah.
But we don't get to see any of those until a bit later on in the film because we skip forward to, 10, 20 years later, whatever, the present day, which was 1980. And we've got this cute little girl. Couldn't really remember this film too well, so I figured she was going to be the main actress, the final girl. And she's hitchhiking into town. Meets a couple of odd people along the way, some sort of crazy old man who's being like, oh, don't go to that camp. She mentions she's going to Camp Crystal Lake in the diner, and it does the record skip like in Twister when that dumb bitch asks, what's a F9 or an R9 or whatever the fuck the worst tornado is, and everyone's like drops their plates or cutlery or whatever they're holding. Everyone's looking at her like, oh, what the fuck, but no one says anything. She hitches a lift from some trucker. I thought he was going to be like your standard leery, mean old man that kind of sets the grimy, sinister tone early in a horror film like this, especially when he was like grabbing her ass as he was pushing her up into the truck and leering at her a little bit, but he actually turned out to be really sound. And he gives us the exposition dialogue for the audience and for her. The background of Crystal Lake, you know, why it's been closed for years. There was a accidental drowning of a young boy. There was 2 kids murdered a year after that, and all these other things. He throws in like the water didn't work once, which I kind of thought wasn't really on the same level as the other things he was saying, but sounds like this camp has been a nightmare to run.
Quit. Quit now.
Quit? Why would I want to quit?
Camp Crystal Lake has changed.
But this geezer with glasses and permanently with his top off, who looks like he probably wanks off to his own mirror image, is deciding he's going to reopen it up. So from all round nearby, teenagers are flooding in to take the job as the new counsellors.
So I assume like some of them wouldn't possibly know the backstory of the camp, just like word of mouth that the camp's reopening, become a counsellor. But the trucker telling the young girl on her way to the camp the backstory of Crystal Lake, saying these murders have taken place, and she's adamant she still wants to go. If I had researched a place that I was going to work in the summer and there was like, it was on an Indian burial ground and then someone had drowned and like everyone was getting murdered and there was some spooky accidents and unexplained events, I'd just be like, fuck it, I ain't going there.
like even if you're a Ricky Gervais type where you're just like, everything's got to be materialistic and is it proven, is there a fucking, no one reads actual scientific articles, but is there a Daily Mail article I won't even read, but the headline refers to a scientific study that says this? If there isn't, then I'm not believing it. But even if you're like that, if you're buying a house and you find out someone was murdered in there and it was the husband and now he's in jail, it's not like there's anyone that's going to return to the scene of the crime, you're still like, ugh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Purely logically, you should be like, I can probably get the price down. They're probably desperate to sell, whatever, blah, blah, blah. This is great. But everyone gets fucking creeped out by that shit.
Take care of yourself, kid.
No sweat. Thanks a lot for the lift.
Yeah, it was just, I just found it really strange how you still want to go to it, but each to their own. I guess at that age, you're a teenager, think you're invincible. It's like summer camp in American Pie. They acted all good, but they were fucking each other all the time. So I guess they want to go for the fun element, but I did find it strange how they continued to go there, especially that first girl who had literally been told everything. I can't account for Kevin Bacon and his crew because I'm not sure if they knew what was going on there, but these are the horror film tropes. We knew what was going to happen to him, and kind of as an audience member, you're like, what the fuck, man?
I guess you got to put yourself back in those teenage shoes where you really would do something like that because you're just like, fuck it, you're invincible, aren't you? But she's not invincible because she's actually the next death in the movie, because we see a little while later she gets dropped off by your man, keeps walking down and ends up seeing another car, so she gets in there and turns out they're actually going to the camp, so that's great. So they're driving along, and first thing I was thinking, oh, something's not right here, is it was suddenly a POV shot. We weren't seeing whoever she was talking to, so I was just like, you're dead, you're definitely not the final girl. Now, this is the first wacky kill, kind of illogical, silly kill we see in the film, which there's a lot of. They kill people in weird ways, or also once they're dead, sometimes they'll just fucking throw them through a window or do something with them to scare the people that are still alive. They end up driving past the camp and she realizes, oh, something's up here. He throws her out of the car, going like 40 miles an hour. She rolls down an embankment, does a pretty cool fucking James Bond jumping over the bonnet sort of roll, and is getting chased in the woods. And we get our first nice practical effect for her death as the unseen killer runs past her, slits her throat. Now again, the camera work shit, the editing shit, the music is corny as fuck, but the fucking effect was great.
This is from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. We took a regular hacksaw and put this huge, ominous blade in there so that when his throat gets cut, you see, we would pump blood through here, and the blood actually came out of the weapon.
Oh my! So you were actually on the set operating the pump.
Yeah, this is really simple. For this, we just simply pump blood when the move was right.
I was gutted because the characters in this film are really fun. They're really likable. I thought Kevin Bacon would stand out, but he kind of doesn't in this film. Like, he's good, but he's just there, and everyone else is there, and everyone else is fun, and they're having fun. And I wanted to go to this summer camp. Like, it looked fucking great.
I think you're right. It was a wacky kill. We see the frame of the guy with a flannel shirt raising the knife, and Savini's effects are bang on. When the knife is drawn across the neck, you see like the cut and then blood coming out. I kind of put myself in the shoes of Cunningham. He's seen Halloween. He wants to jump on the cash cow. He doesn't really know what he wants to do, but he knows he wants to do a slasher film. Limited budget. I was imagining me and you trying to plan this out, because we done media, didn't we? We done a few. We done BTEC media, film. We done a few shoots.
Yeah. I knocked together some fake blood using syrup and red food dye.
But I'm quite interested in, not like a casual film fan, where a lot of casual film fans would go, Declan, and just watch the finished product and be like, kind of see like the whole process of it. The first thing I'd do if I had limited budget but was making a film where loads of people are going to die, I would go out and get the best special effects artist there is. So I think what you said was a bit harsh, the rubbish director. I'm just going to...
I did retract it and say camera work and editing.
You did retract it. I'm going to be a bit kinder and say Cunningham's direction was adequate. not fantastic, but not a pile of shit. But I think Savini's effects carried the film.
Like, this film's kind of known for, and was conceived to be, racing to one gruesome, gory death to another, and trying to outdo each other and having a big crazy finale where there's loads of blood and gore. So... like, the director himself wouldn't argue with what you're saying, but I gotta be honest, as we then get introduced to the other camp counselors and they start arriving, we see Kevin Bacon and his two mates in his car listening to like fucking banjo music, suspecting a little mutant from Deliverance to be sitting in the back on a bale of hay. They show up, and then that goofy kid who's always doing practical jokes and even pretends to drown just so he can kiss a girl. And all the others, you know, the fucking sexy chick who was playing strip Monopoly. They're all fun. They're all really fun characters. And I genuinely was enjoying just the scenes where they're hanging out. If, say, you were skipping over boring bits or going to look at your phone at certain bits, didn't do that, but I'm just saying those moments would be probably when it's either some sort of exposition that knowing slasher movies so well now you don't really need. You know, people walking around because maybe a jump scare is about to happen, but you probably know not. It's just kind of setting the tone. The bits before they're sneaking off and you're going to see some tits, but you have to see 2 minutes of them leaving the party and going to a barn or fucking a room somewhere where no one's in. Those moments, I'm like, oh, just get to a kill or something. But the scenes where they're just fucking about, playing strip Monopoly, like I said, strip Monopoly, again, like, this is a trashy B movie, but it is a good one. Like, there's great little ingredients in it. It was just fun, you know, when the kids are fucking about with the cop. I really like these kids, and I really, as much as an 80s slasher film can be grounded, I believe these were real kids. It wasn't just corny lines being delivered. It was believable, and that's obviously down to the improv, but also down to the director. I'm not trying to backtrack because I was slagging him off at the start, but he clearly set a good environment for this film to succeed against the odds, because other than the fact that they were ripping off a proven success, it's super low budget, virtually none of the actors are good, it's not filmed very well, it's not edited well, there's a lot of problems with it, but the director really knew how to platform it to be a success in despite of all that, and that included working with the actors, and those were honestly some of my favourite scenes.
Hey, what's he talking about?
Hey, don't get smart.
Me? I'm as dumb as they come.
At the end of the day, we're in a slasher film here, Declan. We don't want them to be sitting around talking about Sigmund Freud, like reading books and doing stuff like that. I wish we had a bit more of like the Monopoly scenes, a bit more of getting to know the characters. You said that you liked them and sort of had a slight affinity to them that I got from your words. But when they actually died, I just kind of like didn't really give too much of a shit. No, I didn't have any affinity to them. In fact, I wanted some of them to die quicker than they did. But that's just the way that I am. Like that drowning guy in the lake when he was fucking around, I was like, well, if you want to do that, hope you die next. And separate point, strip Monopoly. That's a bit of a weird one. I've heard of strip poker, but how does that work? Like, pass, go and get your cock out?
That is a testament to only boring people get bored, because that's fucking genius. You don't have cards, you got Monopoly, strip Monopoly. That's fucking great. I could have watched just a film about summer camp in a sort of American Graffiti style film span over 24 hours in a bunch of cast of characters' lives with no real through plot. But wouldn't push back at all on if you didn't like the characters, and they definitely weren't fleshed out. He did a pretty good job of stamping down what their stereotypes was. Kevin Bacon, he's hunky McChadley who fucking shows up with his leather jacket and he's the coolest guy and he's fucking, well, he's only fucking one girl, but he could probably fuck all their misses if he wanted to. You got the in-between dorky and cool guy best friend who's constantly making jokes, and you got the cynical, sexy, bitchy, cool chicks. Not complete shitheads, but they got a nice sort of cynicism to them. Like, you'd probably be into him if you were chatting to him, because you're like, oh, this isn't just some normal basic bitch, like, who's gonna just talk about fucking GMTV or something. They got something about them. They were one-dimensional, but he got it in there, considering the runtime short. You're mainly wanting to get to kills and suspense moments. That takes up most of the film. Then you have to chuck in a couple of exposition scenes. There's limited time to get all this done, so I'll cut him slack for that. I thought he actually did a good job. And also, your point about you wanted some of them to die, why would that not be the point? Maybe it was accidental and it just became one of the gold standard tropes of slasher slasher films later, but 100% you always want a few of them to die. That's the whole point.
I think I've only seen one Final Destination.
I fucking love Final Destination.
I know like number 13's recently come out, but after seeing one Final Destination, you're kind of like, you're not really going to get invested in these characters because you know the whole point of the film is like, what wacky death are they going to experience? That's the reason why you're there. And it's like, kind of like, once you've seen one Saw, it's like, what kind of games Jigsaw going to do to cut this guy up into a million pieces? Do you know what I mean? I knew what I was going in for, but I still wanted more.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And just on Final Destination, if you've only seen the first one, you missed some fucking doozies of deaths, and I'd definitely check out the other ones. They obviously get increasingly shit. I haven't even seen that awful NASCAR one, but the opening death in the second one is a guy driving along, a bunch of logs fall off a truck in front, and it flies through his bonnet, and you just see it comes out the other side. It looked like they just exploded a pig on the front, out the back of the thing. It is fucking great. Speaking of which, let's get to the fun bit. Let's get to the kills.
Yeah, let's.
We start getting a series of deaths, and it's probably more practical reasons, but they don't continuously try to up themselves and get completely insane. We've had Kevin Bacon lying in bed after sex. I think they might have got interrupted, but he's kind of just laying there, you know, in that happy feeling you have
Shaddy
after
McChad.
jizzing.
Yeah.
He gets an arrow through his throat, not fired, but I guess pushed out from underneath the bed. Physics-wise, just the most impractical, difficult way to try and kill someone.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. I guess the killer didn't want to be seen. They couldn't sneak in, essentially, because they
can sneak everywhere, apparently.
Well, yeah, they're hiding under the bed. In terms of the actual practical effects of this death, incredible. Like, I know, as you said earlier, we've seen so much. I've always said on previous episodes of the show and the show in general that I'm a huge fan of practical effects compared to the amount of CGI effects we get today. I was really impressed with it. The way the arrow goes through, the squibs of blood. Big up the special effects artists again.
It was a highly technical special effect that literally they could only shoot once. I mean, when that arrow comes through and the blood squirts up, and Tom Savini is underneath the cot, and he's squirting blood into this tube with this plunger so that it can come up through the fake rubber chest.
It was a fake neck and chest. And I was told that it was a very low budget movie, that they only had built one of these so that it had to work the first time. And then they cut a hole out for me to put my head in, and I was on my knees, you know, underneath this bed, and my neck is back, and the thing is like this, and my neck's like this, and believe me, it was not a comfortable position to say the least.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was amazing. I got to be honest, watching it in a film way, like not as a film fan, but just in the film, like caught up in the story. It's probably my least favorite death. I don't know if it's because I fucking love Tremors and Kevin Bacon, but I don't know. It never really like I always just kind of thought that was dumb. Other than I'm sure the first time I watched it, there was a shock impact value because you really don't see that coming because it's just how would that happen. But I don't know. I just never really. I was just always a bit like whatever. But in terms of the practical effect, I'm looking at it. Even nowadays, sometimes if you're trying to do that, you can kind of see like the head's not really positioned quite right, and you can tell that's obviously not his neck and he's at a different angle and they're trying to fake it. His head's supposed to be straight on his neck, but he's getting a double chin because he's leaning forward. You know, it just doesn't quite look right. Whereas this, it just looks like his neck. The skin makeup, you know, it's darkly lit and it's quick shots and stuff, but from what you can see, it looks great. Tom Savini was literally building everything from scratch. There was no like production warehouse that could do everything for him. He was doing it all DIY himself and coming up with the ideas and then having to figure out how he can do it and building it and making it look realistic. And then it actually failed while they were shooting. The blood pumping wasn't working. So what you're seeing is Tom Savini had to crouch down under the hollowed out fake bed, cut the tube, put his mouth to it and just blow blood splatter out of his neck. So when you're seeing that blood coming out, picture Tom Savini's head about a foot below, blowing the blood out.
After the shot, Sean says cut, and everybody applauds, and Tom Savini comes out from underneath the bed covered in blood, and it's sheep's blood, and it's going like this, and it's just awful. And somebody says, what happened? And he said, well, I started to hit the pump, and the fitting gave way.
So he had to blow the blood through, and it ended up being part of the effect. And we only did it once, and they were like, okay, good, we got that.
If you're going to sit there and blow sheep's blood up through a tube in Kevin Bacon's alleged chest, you're giving a lot.
It was that dedication. And Tom Savini, he's kind of a maverick nutcase anyway. He's a huge character. There's not many special effects guys that end up being household names, getting pretty big supporting roles in a Robert Rodriguez film like Dusk Till Dawn. He's just a legendary figure, pulling a rabbit out of a hat under these sort of circumstances. But he's also just like, the stories from the set, he was constantly doing pranks on all the actors and stuff. He was come out in full makeup as the weird, creepy child Jason, or with blood all down their face, or like an eye falling out of their heads, and jump out from behind a bush and freak the fuck out of them. This whole film set just sounded like a really, really fun time, just like the film seemed like with all the characters interacting, which again, fair play to the director for creating that environment where this film could do so well.
The jokes are, I did like the arrow death where he got an arrow directly to the cranium. There seems to this killer seems to like arrows basically, and arrowheads and killing people off with arrows. I guess you've got to work with the tools you have at your disposal. I would imagine that this camp had some sort of storage room full of chainsaws and shit, but fair play to them, they used the tools that they had to hand.
It's funny as well because every death a lot of the time it meant something, like his death was hinted at earlier when he fired the arrow right near that chick early on and scared her. Massive dick move. And obviously, that comes back to bite him, which makes you think, I assumed that you knew the killer was watching him whenever you'd get that handheld shaky camera and his little theme music would kick in and it would like be peering out from behind a bush as they go canoeing or whatever the fuck. But he must have been watching all the time because he knew that, she knew where everyone was at all times. She was like it's like she had CCTV set up everywhere. Like she knew everything. And I'm saying that's kind of a jumping ahead.
I was going to say, yeah. I know I talked about it before, but the music, the protagonist, the killer will have their own sort of theme tune whenever they're about to attack. Low budget film, but that music, ka-chung, ka-chung, can't really do it, but you know what it is.
Do you know what? I do know exactly what you're trying to do there.
It's my impression.
That sounded like remember in The Simpsons when Homer thought he was psychic?
Oh, yeah. No, that was South Park.
Oh, you're right,
actually.
Simpsons did it first.
Anyway, and that became part of like the character itself because when that music was going to happen, you knew something was going to happen. Credit to Cunningham for seeing that. Obviously he saw Halloween and the John Carpenter's iconic scores throughout
it's much better music
throughout his old catalogue, but credit to him as well for getting Savini for the special effects and getting a good musical score in place to add to the lore of the serial killer in this film's character.
He picked a great one because he definitely didn't have money to pay for someone who was established as great, so he found a talented guy. But yeah, the music isn't as good as Halloween, but it's fucking iconic. And like you said, when it comes on and you're like, oh shit, it's the killer, or something bad's about to happen, or something dumb or funny is about to happen, the music kicks in and you know exactly what the scene's going to be like. And it's like the director giving you a little nudge, be like, kill's coming up.
Yeah.
So I also love Kevin Bacon's girlfriend's death. Just an axe right into the face.
Tom Savini, who had worked with George Romero on Dawn of the Dead.
He would be looking through my screenplay and be saying, well, I noticed you have a hatchet in the face on page 38 or whatever it was. And he turned to Sean and said, do you want a fake face and a real hatchet, or you want a fake hatchet and a real face? Savini just said, anything's possible.
I got the sense that you liked the Kevin Bacon death from the special effects standpoint, but you wasn't blown away by the actual kill method. What do you think of a standard classic axe to the face?
Do you know, it's probably the inverse then of the Kevin Bacon one, because special effects wise, maybe I should be impressed. Like, it was not bad, but I don't look at that and be like, wow, how did they do it? Like, what? To sit there, you know, trying to, like when you see a magic trick and you're trying to play it in here, like, was he distracting me at that moment and he was doing something with his other hand? Like, how did he do that? It just kind of passed me by as a cool effect. But in the moment in the film, I was like, oh shit. Because it always hits differently when it's a chick getting killed. And like I said, I liked all the characters in the film. Weirdly, like, because he missed with he or she missed with the gender fluid serial killer nondescript we haven't seen yet. Missed with the axe early on. Something about that and how dramatic and impactful it was. I just didn't think she was then going to be killed with the axe. I thought she'd be killed in that scene, but in some other way. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of time they'll do that where if that doesn't work, it's going to be something else. So it totally worked for me in sense of being caught up in the story where she just gets that fucking axe slammed to the head. It's always good when someone gets an axe in the head.
You'd think like the axe narrowly missed her and then she'd run away and you'd be like, oh, she's saved herself. And then out of nowhere, they get a chainsaw and lop her head off. I get
an anvil falls on her head.
Yeah, something like that. But if I go back to the first time I saw this film, I think the Kevin Bacon sly arrow through the bed/neck holds more weight for me because I remember the first time I watched it. It's similar to I don't know if you ever seen the film Burn After Reading.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Brad Pitt's in the wardrobe, isn't he? And then you're like, okay, he's cool. And then all of a sudden they shoot
the goofy smile before he gets the bullet in the head.
They shoot him in the head, and I was kind of like, what? They killed off Brad Pitt? Like, and it was kind of like this for the first time for me watching Friday the 13th because obviously I knew Kevin Bacon was like a big star. Now, like, obviously I knew this was like his first role, but I still wasn't expecting him to die suddenly like that out of nowhere. That kill, because of the shock value of it, has always held the most weight for me and still does. Whereas, like, I think an axe to the head is pretty standard fare in slasher films, you know?
I watched this the first time when I was really young, probably didn't even really know who Kevin Bacon was. So I didn't have that feeling, but that makes total sense that you'd have an extra shock factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in Scream 1 where Drew Barrymore, she at the time was by far the biggest star in the film, was prominent on all the posters intentionally because it was such a shock to kill her off in the first scene. Now that was intentional and she was a star, but you basically had that same sort of feeling.
Yeah, I love that scene. I see you.
My boyfriend's big and he's going to kick her out.
Yeah. So, like, for example, Declan, I watched Last of the Mohicans recently for the probably 50th time. And I've seen them running up the mountain to the brilliant score of the Celtic violinist 100 times over, but still that sequence holds the same weight of just such a fucking great. And it's kind of like I find it hard to separate. So for me, Kevin Bacon will always be the standout kill.
So basically everyone's been killed off by about the hour point in the film, and we've just got our final girl left alive. She's freaking out and wandering about at night in this storm, which was a real storm that they decided they didn't want to wait for it to be over because it was going to last a few days, and they didn't have the budget to continue to rent the cameras and equipment for longer, so they were just like, fuck it, we'll just film through the storm. Ended up really working for it, adds a lot of atmosphere. Probably made it fucking hard to film, but really adds to it. And the final girl, she's wandering about, accidentally bumping into her friends. They've kind of been laid out like booby traps. Like some of them just fall from the ceiling and they're like suspended by their legs, and you know the door creaks and opens, and one of her mates has been pinned to it with an arrow, and everyone's just fucking bloods, guts and death and fucked all up. She runs into one of the little cabin rooms and one of her mates gets thrown through the window and just fucking falling on the floor, and you're like, holy shit, this killer must be like fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger or something.
I know.
Or supernatural. Like no one's this strong. No man would be this strong. Like you just throw someone through a window. They can put an arrow through the bottom of a bed all the way up, impaling a person.
That's impossible.
Completely impossible.
Yeah.
Unless they're super strong or supernatural. And in walks this old woman who was apparently a star of a lot of TV from back then. She hated the film when she was making it, just took it for the money, thought it was a piece of shit, kind of crossed their fingers that maybe it wouldn't even get finished or wouldn't get a distributor. And even if it did, probably no one would see it other than teenagers and no one important, so whatever. And she was shocked by how successful the film ended up being.
The image always was of me was that I was this girl next door. And of course, I've always said that there wasn't a gal that ever lived next door to me that I wanted to be like.
Betsy Palmer had worked in television on the morning talk shows, and she was squeaky clean.
I was always trying to prove that I wasn't the girl next door. So the phone rang, and my agent said, "How would you like to do a movie?" I said, "Great." And he said, "Well, now there's just one other thing I have to tell you." He said, "It's a horror film." And I said, "Oh, no." So the script came, and I read it, and I said, what a piece of...
But she wanders in and she's just like this old lady who's not been seen much before in the film, or maybe even at all. So you're like, okay, I guess that's the killer. Kind of like when I said at the beginning, where the moment that girl got into the truck when she was hitchhiking and she was having a conversation, but it was in POV, your mind goes, okay, I'm doing horror movie math, you're dead, and that's the killer, but we're not going to see the killer yet. In that moment, the sum was coming to she's the killer, but in your head you're kind of like, really? And forget even like the silly physics of throwing people through the window and how she that strong and how she overpowering people. Because whatever, it's a film, it's fun. But just, I remember the first time just being a bit like, nah, there's going to be another twist. Like it's going to be a moment where the final girl, she doesn't trust her. She thinks she is the killer and she runs off and realizes, oh, I should have trusted her. And she had a car, we could have left together. And now I'm getting chased by the real killer. But that never comes because it turns out this is Jason Voorhees' mother. And the actual killer of this film and the person who started off the franchise, because Jason Voorhees, as we know him, with the mask, wouldn't even appear till the third film. Jason Voorhees as the hulking giant guy who walks 1 mile an hour but somehow always catches up with you, wouldn't appear till the second film. He only features in this film as mutilated child Jason Voorhees. And the real villain and monster of the movie is his mother, who's gone completely mad because as she tells the girl in her increasingly batshit crazy monologue that her son Jason was the person that the truck driver spoke about at the beginning, the young poor child that drowned because 2 counselors that were supposed to be looking out for him were fucking. And also he was a slow swimmer and apparently horribly deformed and disfigured and weird looking.
Jason from Friday the 13th, the first one, was, I kept thinking of this guy that I saw in my neighborhood when I was a kid. He was misshapen. He had a big ear that was pushed down here, and it was lower than the other ear. So he needed to be retarded, he needed to be hydrocephalic or a pinhead or something like that, you know. So if you can do that and make it look like there's bone structure beneath all these deformations, then the audience buys it.
That explains why she's on this rampage, why she's lost her mind, and also actually builds in one of the few films that cleverly actually does build in a reason why fucking equals death in this movie, even though it's became a non-story, non-plot element golden rule of the genre afterwards. But it's actually quite clever that there was a reason for it.
I mean, when this was all revealed, like when Jason's mum first came along, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the first time I watched it. When she turned up, I was kind of thinking like, number one, why are you here? Like just some old woman that has just turned up in a storm. Number two, put myself in the last remaining survivor's shoes, and I was like, you should be a bit more questioning of who this person is. But then I put myself in her mindset of like, she's deathly scared. And you know, like imagine if you was a teenager and you saw a person that looked like a caring maternal person, you just be frightened, you know.
We said it before, you know, if you say mass shooter, you think white guy.
Yeah.
If you say drive-by shooting, you think black guy, maybe a Latino guy. Very rare occasions, a East Asian guy that grew up in the hood. But, you know, you go to certain things, and if you're thinking crazy serial killer that's murdered everyone I know in the space of a night, you're not thinking old lady.
Yeah, but my real confusion around it comes back to the first kill, the hitchhiker girl. We see behind the shot of the person with the knife, and like to me it's someone in a flannel yellow shirt, and it's clearly a bloke's build.
100%.
Like that's what really wound me up about it.
Clearly physically a man, probably Tom Savini or his assistant, because as we get to the final big dramatic showdown, as Jason Voorhees' mum has gone fucking mental and she's chasing her around and they're having a fight, and it's the classic, she falls over and she manages to knock the killer over, but as she's going to run away, the killer grabs her ankle and they're struggling for a bit, but then she just managed to get away at the last second. They're doing all that song and dance, you know, they're right by the lake waters, duking it out. She manages just to scramble out of her grasp before she's killed, runs up, grabs a machete that would would become
Yeah.
the staple weapon of the franchise. I think the first time we've seen it, maybe not,
Yeah, it
but
was.
okay, there we go. She grabs it and then it goes into awful slow motion. Obviously wasn't slow motion, was just normal rate that they slowed down to the point where I actually thought my stream had frozen because it seemed to just pause on a certain still, but then it moved on. I was like, oh, okay. Goes to awful slow motion as our final girl uses the machete to lop her head off. And when her head's rolling off, great effect, by the way. It was obviously a fake head made by Savini, but it was real human hair, real pig's blood and guts that was used in it. And it's a really well done effect. But if you slow it down or still frame it or use that awful slow motion attempt they did in the previous couple of moments, you'll see it is two big hairy hands holding the handle of the machete as they swing it past because they didn't have the girl around to do the stand-in. So it was actually Tom Savini's assistant was in the fake human torso sort of suit around his head with the head getting cut off, and Tom Savini holding the machete as it swings into frame.
But I really liked the actual effect of the
Brilliant.
head flying off, the blood and guts, and the slow-mo, kind of like when you chop a chicken's head off and it's like just runs around for a bit before it collapses. Jason's mum's hands going up and down as her head has flown off.
Yeah.
The effect was fantastic. The fight in itself, the battle, was actually quite a good battle. The girl was picking up rowing oars and like defending herself. The actual final sequence of the battle and the head lopping off was great.
Totally agree with you. Like it actually felt like a real struggle, like life and death struggle. It was pretty believable. And point on the chicken getting his head cut off. My dad grew up on a farm, and he said one of the funniest things he'd ever seen in his life, his like all-time laughs, was his dad, my granddad, missing slightly with the axe, only cutting most of the chicken's head off. So it was running around with its head half hanging off, spraying blood out. That wasn't the funny bit. The funny bit was when it ran in to the kitchen where his sisters were making dinner, ran round the kitchen spraying blood on all of them as they jumped up on the counter screaming.
Fucking hell.
Fucked up does that sound?
I can imagine your dad just bursting out laughing.
Would that traumatise you?
No, it would.
Well, it would be...
Makes me not want to eat chicken. And I think I got chicken for dinner.
I love animals, but fuck it, mate.
Yeah.
Meat tastes good. So, she has killed the weird, freaky, now shown to be an old woman serial killer that's killed everyone in camp. But I think pretty smartly, she decides, I don't know if there's more than one killer. Either way, I'm freaked the fuck out. What, am I going to walk all the way out of camp or look for a car? She can't even turn around without finding one of her friends dead. So she's like, I'm just going to get into the boat, paddle myself into the middle and wait for the morning till the cops show up. And when they do, she sees them. She's like relaxed. She's like, she actually looks like she kind of relaxed. She's chilling out. All her friends are dead, but she's like, fuck it. It's a lovely morning. I'm in this boat. I lived. The cops are there. Everything's going to be all right. Until we get the classic shock jump scare ending with child mutated, creepy, I guess, mutant zombie ghost Jason jumping out of the water covered in seaweed, looking like the fucking Swamp Thing, grabbing her around the neck and pulling her under.
The part of Jason, we wound up hiring Ari Lehman. He came out and did it.
We were both so cold and freezing. They had the heaters there and, they had towels as soon as we came out. And we did it a few times. And I'm going, Sean, are you sure we want to do this again? He goes, we're going to get it. We're going to get it right. Don't worry about it. This is it.
Now, in some versions, it ends right there. In some other versions, I'm assuming the original theatrical cut, it goes to the police station where she wakes up and she's alive and it just kind of muddles out. But it does at least hint of, well, Jason must still be alive. He's still there. Sequel, please, if this film does well. The version where it just ends like her being killed like that is fucking amazing. And for a film that borrowed and openly ripped off another successful film by a great director, that was an ingenious moment that I'm pretty sure had never really been done before and became kind of like a common staple of slasher films and other horror films in general. It was brilliant. It was a gut punch. No one was safe, not even the final girl. There was no real final girl because she got done as well. And also, it kind of made me think, I kind of wish he was the killer the whole time. I don't want a real human serial killer that's the woman. It's a good twist for the time, I guess, but that was fucking scary. Like, mutant kid zombie Jason is fucking scary looking.
Yeah, I don't know if you could have like a deformed baby as the killer though.
Yeah, fuck it, of course you can.
Yeah, you can. Well, you had a leprechaun that was running around.
Exactly, that's
Hit
offensive
Warwick
to Irish
Davis.
people.
Yeah. I saw the other ending where she wakes up in a hospital surrounded by doctors. That you said, and she says like, "Oh, my friend's dead. What about the boy from the lake?" And they're like, "What boy?" And then it just ends there. The ending without that, when he just jumps out and it freeze frames, it's great. The hospital one's shit.
Warner Brothers took foreign distribution, Paramount took domestic. At that point, Frank Mancuso was running distribution for Paramount, and he made a choice to take this no-star independent film, release it nationally with a national budget, and see what happens. And the notion of doing an independent film that would ever be released nationally had never occurred. When the film was released, by and large, it was dismissed by the critics as being exploitative and just not really worthy of attention. The kids would come out of the theater telling the kids who are coming in the theater, "Oh, you better look out," or "There was so much fun." And it became a really big social event.
My final thoughts are, I have a lot of criticisms for it. It's a weak film in a lot of areas. I totally agree with you about the editing, and the camera work looks like just terrible. Like, you are right. The acting's not strong, but again, the acting doesn't really take me away from it. I've seen loads of films, Declan, where the acting's so shit that it's fucking unwatchable. It's weak in a lot of areas and it doesn't make sense. Even talking about it now, when it was clearly a bloke that killed the first person, that is kind of riling me up a lot. When it turns out the twist at the end to be Jason's mum, I'm just sitting there like, a middle-aged old woman is launching people through windows and axing people to the head. It's a bit stupid again, but the gut punch of him coming out of the lake and dragging her down and the film stopping, that's brilliant. Special effects by the master, Savini, fantastic. People that are just standard film fans, it might be a difficult watch, but if you love your horror and your slasher flicks, I would definitely recommend Friday the 13th. It's a trailblazer. You have to watch the original to appreciate the later on version. So there's a lot of faults with it, but it's still a decent film.
Fair enough. I definitely recommend this film. I fucking love it. You know, if you're watching 80s slasher film, you're probably not your bog standard go and see Endgame and whatever blockbuster there is sort of movie fan. So you're probably not going to be put off by the fact that it's dated in the ways you know it's going to be dated. And watching this again after many years, it was dated in all the ways I was expecting it to be. And none of that bothered me because I was expecting it. The special effects were really good, but also kind of like clumsily presented. Nothing to do with Savini's work, but you know, the camera work, like you said. I knew the plot was going to be predictable because I've seen it a million times. It's not the fault of this film or the fact that it ripped off a film from 2 years earlier. You know, it's just been done to death, and it clearly doesn't bother people that it's formulaic. They love it. I was actually shocked that in a lot of ways it wasn't dated. Interactions between the cast of mostly not very good teen actors was brilliant. Like, I really enjoyed those moments. I believed the dialogue, even the little moments where someone's just fucked and the guy's gone off somewhere and the girl's looking at herself in the mirror and she starts doing an impression of some old actress or some old character from a film. And it's just, again, a little fun moment of flair. One-dimensional characters, but have enough about them and enough about them in those moments where it's not just play by numbers. They're not just spitballing until they get to the next kill. Like you said, you wanted those scenes to be longer because you wanted to know more about the characters. I wanted those scenes to be longer just because I really enjoyed them. And I was taken aback by how enjoyable this film was outside of the kills and the suspense moments and the final big crazy sequence and the gore and the blood. I actually could have watched just a drama of those moments if it played out without any death or murder or suspense or, you know, zombie deformed children or crazy serial killer mothers. So yeah, that is an easy recommendation for Friday the 13th.